Welcome to my coach interview with Wigmore LTC's finest, otherwise known as Joe Perkins and Scott Davies. This interview is all about their club tennis coaching experience and head coach role at Wigmore LTC. I'd like to introduce Joe and Scott before we start. So they are the directors of Joe and Scott Tennis, a premier tennis provider in southwest London. Joe and Scott are also the co-head coaches of Wigmore LTC and have been for 3 years. They have many years of coaching experience between them, and their goal is to drive tennis participation in their local area and beyond. So now it's time for the questions. Guys, hello. I hope you're both well and looking forward.
Hello. Thank you for having us, Jake. Thank you.
Pleasure. So the first question is, what do you take into account when creating each term's program for all the players?
Shall I speak here, Scott?
You can start with that one, Joe.
Okay. That was just our way of saying our names so that you knew which was which.
Exactly.
We prepared that, obviously. So in terms of kind of planning for all of the players in the program, I think what Scott and I say we've done well, we've inherited a little bit of it, but what we're really proud of is actually our team at Wigmore, and if we were elsewhere, we would try and establish the same there too, because what we do is we rely on our team to do a lot of the planning with us, for us, but we leave it to them to teach what they think is most appropriate within boundaries. Obviously, we do want everybody to be coaching along the same lines and things like this. We don't want one coach to be, being a forehand while another coach is doing something entirely different, practicing attacking smashes on the first week, for example. If you get a beginner player come along to a group lesson and that's what you introduce them to, it's likely to put them off, or more likely to put them off anyway. So we like everybody to be on the same wave, so that if we need to, we can move people around, especially at the beginning of terms. There's so much. If we've got new players, it's really important to be able to put people in the best places for them. So we kind of leave it to the coaches a little bit to do some of the work. Obviously, Scott and I are involved, and we do try and get everyone's opinions on a general termly theme. So, for example, in our academies, we might look at a very broad theme of consistency. It's very broad. That could be forehand, backhand, serve, volleys, whatever. And then we let the coaches decide within that theme what it is that they want to bring to their lessons.
Okay.
Absolutely. I would just add that in this broad theme, we do have quite a flexible syllabus, and it's mainly centered around, each stages what we expect of each player. And so therefore, for player that, say, you teach, Jake, is moving from red to orange, and I'm teaching them when they move to orange, I know that this particular player has covered, X, Y, Z skills, and they'll be able to have the right skills by the time they move into a particular class as well. So that's how. So we keep it quite broad. But we have like certain principles at each stage which we follow.
I really, I think this is probably my favorite question to ask you guys, because obviously, we're involved as coaches under you guys, but for the viewers and for the players, it's good for them to actually see what goes into each term and program, and that it is so specific. It's not just go out there and coach or teach tennis, but there are so many things in the background, and obviously individual to each color or age, etc. Let's move on to the second one then. So what do you find most rewarding about being the head coaches at Wigmore LTC?
I'll start with this one. I think I'm sure Joe will have a very similar answer. I think the most rewarding thing about being particularly head coach is about getting, large numbers of players playing, and not just playing, but also like staying with it and loving it. And essentially making it part of like essentially part of a family's life. you know, because, you know, at Wigmore, as you know, we have like a lot of family memberships, you know, family members, you know, so watching, you know, getting a whole family more involved, you know, we, you know, us coaching the parents and the kids and then getting them to play outside of their sessions, that seeing that to me is like one of the most rewarding parts of it, because essentially what you're doing is creating, you know, that's a sport for life then for that whole family, and seeing that in like large numbers at Wigmore is definitely one of the most rewarding parts of the job, definitely.
Yeah, I think to add, I think 2020 has been was a year, thank God.
Yeah.
2020 was a year where actually opportunity arose for young people, young players, our young players, to get to the tennis club and use it more with one another. And in, I don't know how many years, 8 years, 7 years, whatever it is that I've been there, you just don't see that happen. I think probably it's reflective across the country as well, is that you don't always get lots of young players wanting to play together, and we managed to do that a little bit more, and they came down with their families and they've spent more time at the tennis club, and I think it'll help so much more for the future, where they just feel more comfortable at the tennis club rather than it just be a place where they come and play tennis.
Yeah, I thought that as well. Definitely, you know, it was crazy in the time that I've been at the club, and obviously been in and around tennis, that it was so busy. And you saw, like, if like the kids were just playing, then you saw the adults getting on court and the other way round. So to see so many new faces, like new members and faces that you'd always see off the court, get on the court as well was crazy last year. And I'm sure we'll probably do that this year as well.
And kids, and you know, telling, you know, actually getting them to bring their friends down a lot more, and you know, them being the ones to initiate it, which has happened a lot more in 2020, and will be something obviously we try and drive a lot more in 2021 as well.
That's putting a healthy spin on 2020.
Other initiatives, it is, isn't it? You know, tennis, you know, was definitely the highlight of the year by far.
Well, we were very lucky, weren't we? That was one of the things that came back quite early, and that a lot more people got involved with. Okay.
Yeah, it went crazy, didn't it?
So let's move on to question 3. How would you describe your coaching style?
I think we'll both have slightly different answers for this, maybe. It's definitely a question for both of us, isn't it? I would describe my coaching style as flexible, loud, energetic. I don't know, Jake, would you agree with those things?
Most definitely the louder part, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I do like to do those things. I find that if I get to it, doesn't matter if it's adults or it's kids, I find that a lot of the energy from the lesson comes from the coach, or can come from the coach. Certainly in the way that I deliver them, a lot of the energy comes from me. And so I like there to be energy in lessons, whether it's, you know, beginner red players at 5 years old, or, you know, a group of intermediate adults. I really like there to be energy and liveliness. I want everybody to be having a good time. So I'm definitely loud and quite energetic on court, but I said flexible first. And I think flexible is really important because I think it's something that I do quite well. It's definitely something I can still improve on, but being able to differentiate for different standards, different styles, different personalities is really important. And I think that's kind of one thing that I really try and put out there, is that I'm always, you know, I'm happy to deliver a session in one way, and then the next week, if somebody's coming less motivated, to try and deliver it in a entirely different way. Yeah, I'd say that's my style of coaching. What about you, Scott?
That was very good. I wrote down 3 words. They're all beginning with P, the 3 Ps: positive, personal, and productive. I don't know why I put productive down. I think I just wanted to have 3 Ps. Positive because it's very similar to what Joe said, but I'm just using different words essentially. Positive because you've got to be that energy. You've got to, you know, they've got to be on court. They want to be on court with you. They've got to have that need. So if you're like a really negative person all the time, you know, they're not going to want to pay to have lessons. You've got to be a positive person to create change. As Joe said, you've got to be flexible. You know, I call it personal. You've got to be personal with them because you've got to be able to relate to them. You've got to be able to, you know, as Joe said again, you know, understand their humor, understand their personality, understand, you know, these things, because that might be how you, you know, how you get to them, how you manage to, you know, change something. And I like to say the reason why I put productive, which is a bit of a silly word, I like to think I'm quite good at being able to figure out the problem and solve it quickly, because I think people being able to, you know, in lessons, people don't want to necessarily have to wait a really long time, but being able to identify and go, no, that's what the problem is, and then interject with a solution. I would put that as a strength as well. So there you go. Positive, personal, productive.
Love it.
There you go.
Me working alongside you guys, you know, you can see all of those things on court. So yeah, I really like those ones. This next one is interesting because we always, you know, hear it from kind of like a player point of view, you know, always saying, you know, the players always maybe sometimes complain about parents or they bring parents involved, but from your role, how do you, or from a coaching role, how do you deal with difficult parents?
Do you want to take this one, Scott?
Yeah. I think the key thing is as early as possible. Or it's almost like a preventative thing. You know, if you've got good communication, if you can kind of identify there could be a problem, being clear and early at, you know, identifying things like that is far better than letting it suddenly, you know, snowball into a massive issue down the line. You know, so if you're clear with your goals, clear with, you know, what you expect of players, clear with, you know, what you are doing, then that will, you know, prevent a lot of, you know, difficult parent issues. But if then you have to rise that, I think, you know, you've just got to be honest. You can't, you know, you have to give your professional opinion, and you know, you can't you've just got to accept you're not going to be able to please everyone as well, because, you know, I think we all want to be, you know, be able to please everyone, but sometimes you've got to accept, in very rare occasions, I would hope to add that, you know, it is, you know, you've just got to go with your gut opinion, really. What would you say, Joe?
I think it's important to create a distinction here in that we, you know, we're speaking from a head coach point of view, and we are head coach of a local tennis club. We're not a high performance club. We're just a local tennis club. And so in other scenarios, certainly in high performance, when I used to work in that a little bit, there used to be a little bit more of a culture of kind of pushy parents and things like this. But I think ultimately the best way to get around that in that kind of situation is to work with the parent to some extent, to educate the parents. Certainly at the beginning, you know, if somebody's getting into high performance, if they're coming in as like a red player and, you know, trying to go into whatever program, whatever club might be offering, is to educate the parent as well and say, look, this isn't necessarily what we expect, but this is how things work, and this is the best thing you can do, and this is the best way that you can help your child while they're trying to do this, etc. But again, like Scott said, it's almost preemptive. It's to get out there early and do those things before they become an issue. It's, you know, sometimes it can be scary to, especially when you've got to go to a parent or they come to you with a problem or something they've seen. But the best thing to do is to have communication, open the lines of talk, and get out there and just talk to them and sit down. A lot of parents are, you know, perfectly reasonable. Some maybe not so much.
No, I thought
like
sorry.
As Joe said, it's about, you know, and like what we did recently with the new kind of like player reports and educating players on, you know, the new stages and everything that we were making. You know, that's very important. And, you know, we did get feedback about that was, you know, really, really helpful. And, you know, they understand what's expected. And, you know, because if they don't have that, that can cause a lot of problems. If they have an expectation of their child, which is over here, and our expectation is over here, they need to know why it's so different. But if we say that it's here from the get-go, then there won't be that problem then. So, you know, yeah, it's early, and lots of communication is, you know, very good.
Yeah, I think it's great to see it from your role's point of view, because you, like I said at the start, you always hear it from, you know, just a normal coach or from a player's point of view, but to hear it from your point of view and different areas which, like a coach like me wouldn't be able to see it in, it's great for you guys to put that those things across as well. And again, I think coming from what you've both talked about there, they just need to be educated as well. In certain ways.
And also getting, and from a head coach point of view, is getting the coaching team to be obviously involved with that. And, you know, because as a head coach, you can't necessarily know exactly how every single player is when you're dealing with hundreds of kids. So, you know, having the coach, you know, the coach also be if there's a problem or anything, having them to be able to identify and, identify it from a very early stage, you know, so it doesn't necessarily come up to the head coach and then them not understand why there has been that problem, you know. So, you know, it's including it in the team as well, not just us, you know, doing that communication, but, you know, all the way across the whole coaching team.
That's great. So next one, in the past, what are some examples of how you've kept players motivated during the terms? Like what's maybe brought them back to another term, or just continue playing on your program?
Joe can do this one first.
Okay, so I think there's a few things here. I think setting the level of challenge is really, really important. If you go in with really high expectations of players that haven't played much tennis before, or just are less able at that stage, at that moment in time, then you need to make the challenge right for them. And what's tricky in our tennis club is that you might find a group of 6 players and you have a varied standard there. You can have players that can rally at a baseline, and then maybe players that make connections with the ball but certainly can't rally, and it's up to us to try to create a lesson that suits them both. And that's always a challenge, because if you go straight down the middle, potentially you might feel like you're doing the right job, but it might be too weak for one player and then they're not going to want to come back. The other one might feel pushed, and depending on how you deliver it, etc., they might want to come back, but it could not work. So you've got to be able to differentiate within a lesson itself for different standards. This is something I think the LTA are doing really well at the moment, and we certainly try and push lots at the Wigmore. Something else I like to do is, right from the off, I like to make the start of the lesson really interesting, really exciting, whether that's, again, red players or yellow ball players. If you're just doing something a little bit different at the beginning of each lesson, then I find certainly that right from the get-go, the players are, oh, this is a bit different. Oh, I'm not just going straight into this thing that I'm just used to doing. They're immediately go, oh, what's going on? Okay, right. Oh, I've got to do this now. And then they start getting a little bit more into it. And hopefully that brings with it a little bit more motivation. The other thing to remember is that motivation is a really difficult thing. Actually, some people are just really, intrinsically motivated, and other people sometimes less so. Or, I struggle with this. Some days I just wake up and I can't be bothered to do anything. Like, that's just me. And if I went and had my Spanish lessons when I was still doing those, on a day like that, I really struggle. I don't think there's something that anyone else can do to motivate me necessarily to want to do it better. They just have to work with me to get me through it, essentially, so that I still have a nice time and I still want to come back next time. And then hopefully I'm more motivated to actually give it a little bit more. I don't think you can always fully motivate somebody. And sometimes as coaches, we need to be more aware of that. Yes, obviously, we want that player to be there and working really hard, and whoever's paying for that lesson, whether it's them or a parent, wants their player to be working really hard. But sometimes it's just not possible to have that level of motivation that we're going to be like, yes, boom, you've excelled every single time.
We do call you Mr. Motivator, Joe. That is your name at Wigmore.
I do wear
that. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add, because was your point about also motivating people to come back as well? Is that what you?
Yeah.
Another thing you could do is have things, that wrap around the coaching program, like have events and stuff, and because kids always like having goals, and they want to beat such and such a person, they want to be better at their matches. So having things like match plays and box leagues and parties and all sorts, as well, kind of that was a very good way of keeping people motivated and keeping them coming back. From a coaching program point of view, from like a private lesson point of view, it would mainly be goal setting, like really working with them on what they want to achieve. Because if you don't have anything you're going to achieve, then why are they staying there? So, that would be how I would do it from a private lesson point of view as well.
Okay. There's some great stuff and different stuff in there. So, I guess we can all learn a lot from that. Next one is, what is the most difficult part of being the head coaches at Wigmore LTC?
Go on, Scott.
Difficult bit, right? Well, I think one of the most difficult parts, which we're particularly finding recently, is being able to cater for, essentially being able to cater for everyone, because we've got large numbers in every kind of category, and being able to offer each group and standard a session at so many available times is becoming quite it's a good challenge to have, don't get me wrong, but it's becoming difficult. And of course then if you can't cater for those people, then you lose them out of the program. And we always find as head coaches, we have these, when people are moving, particularly from from primary school to secondary school, and there's big jumps, from when they're moving from stages, suddenly realizing, we've got a huge number of green players going over to yellow. Do we have enough space? And being able to have to rejig the coaching program and able to cater for that.
Yeah, it's something that we've always, or so far we've managed to do, but very much coming slowly to an end, where if the coaching program keeps expanding, we can't add anything else, and we will have to find some other way of getting around that particular issue.
And especially like being at the club, it's not like we have like 4 or a few courts, but we've got loads of courts as well. So I guess that's even harder for you guys as well to have to deal with.
Yeah, but it's a good problem to have. I don't know if that's a cop-out answer. Difficult part, but that's the main thing that comes to mind. Being able to please everyone, because you can't. It's very difficult. You've got to try and cater and please the most widest array of people you can. But yeah, I think that's the main issue we have, which is a good problem, which we'll try and tackle in 2021.
I don't know if this kind of links in this next question, but let's see. What is the most difficult decision you had to make as a tennis coach / head coach at Wigmore LTC?
Go on, Joe.
Well,
if you don't have enough, I've got one.
There could be lots of things, really. I think one thing that is always quite tricky for all tennis coaches, whether it's me or Scott or any coach at a club or in high performance, is when almost when to let a player go, which sounds a strange answer, but sometimes, and I think coaches can be guilty of this, if you've got a good player, not necessarily a good player, but if you've got a good player, actually releasing them to go to maybe another club where they're going to get more out of it, or just within their own club. There might be little Theo, who I really, really like teaching, and he, we've been working together for a year or so, and I just think he's a real pleasure. But actually, the group itself might not be the best group for him anymore. And actually, I can recommend, or maybe going this one. It's not with me though, and sometimes that can be quite tough to do. Is actually just to say, no, don't have me anymore. You need to go over here. This is the best thing for you now. Sometimes that's not always that. On the second scenario, when you can very clearly see it's for the best benefit of the player, and they'll still be around and you might still see them. It's a bit easier to do, but it's not always as straightforward as that. Sometimes if you can't fit someone in anymore, it can be really hard, and that can be a really difficult decision to make as to whether you have to try and fit them in somewhere else or try and offer them to another coach.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That is very, very difficult part of it. I've one other thing. I mean, this is not a huge problem, but when you're implementing big changes, so difficult decision. I wouldn't say it was a difficult decision to make. It was more of like the ramifications of it. Was when we were reorganizing the teams and doing some much needed restructuring, having to, because there were some egos and, people have been in certain teams for, the end of time, and having to do that and try and force these changes, that was a difficult thing. And we took a lot of, criticism, which we, have backed up, but that was a difficult thing to do, because if something's having to deal with legacy in clubs is quite difficult. And another one that comes to mind, it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but was shutting the entire coaching program down 3 times due to coronavirus. That was by far the hardest coaching decision we've had to do, but that was out of our hands, of course, because that was a legal requirement. But that's got to be mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I think I can relate a little bit more to like Joe's one, or I've had similar experiences to that, whether I was on the playing side or the coaching side. So I think a lot of the viewers, like in terms of coaches and even players, can, they'll probably go, oh yeah, I remember that time when I had to leave that club and join that place, or had to move groups, etc. But if you've got a good coach, like you guys are, then you have to trust their decision, and it's obviously for the best. So I think there has to be, it has to be professional as well. Okay,
absolutely.
Okay. So next one, I'm sure there's probably one that stands out for you guys individually, but can you just describe one of your most successful moments as a tennis coach?
This is a hard one for me, because it's quite a lot, and one that stands out. It's not like a big kind of achievement of getting someone to win a tournament or getting someone to a certain level. The one, for some reason, that has always stuck with me was when I was still working in Chester. I was much younger, less experienced coach then, and I was essentially tasked with this. We were doing holiday camps, and there was this particular player who absolutely hated tennis, absolutely just despised it, didn't want to be there, absolutely didn't want to be there. And I'm like going to my head coach going, I don't know what earth I'm going to do. And they basically said, right, it's your mission by the end of today that they've got to, because this was a Monday, that they've got to want to stay for the rest of the week. And I had to come up creative ways and, adapt and do all sorts of stuff. And the end of the week, they absolutely loved tennis and they wanted to come back, and they haven't stopped playing now. So that's my even though it's only a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's made a huge impact on me, because if I always think, if I can change that person from hating tennis to loving it, then if I'm faced with that problem again, I'll be able to do it.
That's a really nice answer. You get.
Sorry, Joe.
Because I'm going to go with a level answer.
There you go. Well, there are different things that make impacts, though.
Exactly. I won't mention the player, but there is a lady at our tennis club who joined our beginner group on a Thursday night many moons ago now, and I hope she won't mind me saying, but she was absolutely terrible. She really wasn't very good, and it was the kind of level where it was a beginner class and everybody knew it was a beginner, but she was still a level below that almost. But she was really keen and was motivated, and so kept coming back, which was great. And so we did some private lessons as well. So we did the group, we did some private lessons, and then she started to get a bit better, and it was all going quite well, and she started to get better, and then she got to a point where she felt like she could start coming to social tennis, or was a bit more confident and started to come to social tennis. And she then started to come to social tennis quite regularly, and she wasn't that good at first, but she came along and she kept persisting, and she came along, and then everybody got to know her, and then it wasn't a case of, oh, I've got to play with that person. It was like, oh yeah, I'll play with that person, I know her quite well, and then we'll go on and court and play. And to the point now where she's in a team, and she's not the worst in the team by a long way. She's in a team and she plays well in that team. And I'd still just think back to that kind of almost quite quiet woman that I first encountered in that beginners class, and where she's come to now. And it's not me. It's not really, I can take credit for it. But being a part of her journey, I think is something I consider one of my best successes. She took it upon herself, and it was all about her, and she came along and she carried on playing, and she persisted. She came to social tennis and kept going, and she's the one who's still really motivated to play. But I still look at that and I just think I'm happy to have been part of that, and see where she is now. And I think she can still get better. That backhand that lady's got, I don't know if either one of you know who you're talking about.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
That backhand,
that's a great one. Yeah,
can work really well. And so I think she's got more to come as well.
Okay. I like hearing those sorts of things, because I wasn't fully expecting you to go like when a player won a tournament or went to box A in the league. But yeah, it's great to hear those differences, and it's kind of club-based stuff as well, which is so nice to hear. And I think those sorts of experiences and moments, you can actually, like Scott mentioned, you can use and try out on other players when you feel like it's a similar situation. Whereas sometimes, like if you picked like, when a player won a tournament, it's a little bit more, it could happen with that person, or you're not going to be put in that sort of position all the time, where the things that you guys have mentioned, you probably would be put in those positions more than something else. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's try and cram in one or two more before we wrap things up. But this one, I quite like this one as well. Have you experienced coaching a men's or women's team, which I know you have, but who have struggled to perform, and how did you resolve the problem?
So I think Scott's going to leave this one to me, aren't you, Scott?
I am, because I thought that you did in one of the particular teams. I know you did change something.
I mean,
I'm keeping it very vague for you there. I'm keeping it very vague.
Oh, well, I don't know what you're referring to be honest, Scott.
What I said was in one of the teams, I know that you managed to really improved like the teamwork and the camaraderie, and got them to work together a lot more, and that really helped from like a team cohesion kind of way.
That particular team, it also helped a lot with the idea of with everybody being able to play, if necessary, everybody being able to play amongst one another. Whereas previously in that particular team, there had been, it's not egos or anything like that, but there had been players that just didn't like playing with another player a little bit, sometimes because of the way they might say things on the court or just the way they behave. And actually, we went down the approach of being really, really positive. There were lots of high fives put into lessons and things like this. And also I knew one player in question quite well. So she and I just had a conversation a little bit about it, not all the details, but we had a bit of a talk about it. And to this day, that team is, I think all of the teams, one thing I'm really happy with all the ladies teams in particular is that they're all very welcoming, and you can go from the ladies' second team and go and play with people in the fourth team and they'll love it and they'll chat to you loads and you'll have a great time because everyone's been really lovely. And it's exactly the same with the third team as well. And you can just move between them all, and everybody, you can come down on Friday night and see two ladies' second team players playing with a ladies' third team and a ladies' fourth team player, and they're all just playing because everybody all gets on really well. But that has kind of helped that team when they don't have all of their players available. And that's something that at club level you experience all the time, is that if there isn't availability from everybody all the time, you can't put out your four best players all the time. You have to almost mix and match a bit sometimes. And if nobody has that ego and everybody's happy to play with one another because of the energy they will put on the court, then that can be really helpful. And it did really help that team, actually, is from that point on, the team, I think, got promoted to 2 divisions. Probably not to do with that, or very little to do with that. They were just a good team and they finally started performing. But I think it helped. I think it helped everybody just gel that little bit more. And when you're on court and you're enjoying yourself, you're going to play better.
100%, definitely.
Do you feel your sort of recent team trial idea, do you think that helped for the stuff that Joe just talked about there?
What, getting that more teamwork? I don't know, because I think there was a little bit of, I think us calling it a team trial actually made it quite scary. But having what we turned it into was more like a team weekend. So it was more about, yes, it was about getting people to join the team, having an avenue for them to actually, join, because there wasn't really, just before that, it was just, who you knew. But having all the teams down at once, talking, socializing, the bar was open, they could, all, play together and have drinks and have fun. I think that has definitely helped a little bit. And yeah, like it makes, if, as Joe said, if you all get along, you are more likely to win, because, how many times have you been on court with someone in a doubles match and you don't particularly get on well with them, your doubles partner, and then shockingly you don't play very well. So yeah, it's definitely helps. And also from our coaching point of view, obviously we can help them in team selections and their tactics, and obviously which we talk about in their team training. So all that together is how we kind of help the Wigmore teams.
Mm-hmm. And even sometimes I remember when there was like the training on a Wednesday evening, when I used to see the men's teams and like the top 1 or 2 women's teams as well training together. You wouldn't normally see that before that initiative. You wouldn't really see that before. So it was great to see like those guys merging together, even if it was for an hour a week.
That's true. And we are doing, that's what we need to bring that back, hopefully again in 2021. So we were doing that more with the men's teams. We were calling them team battles, so they could play against each other and then also socialize and then get that kind of, again, kind of friendly rivalry going between the teams as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's move on to our last one. How do you know as head coaches if you are doing an effective job? What are your measures?
Well, I think first of all, if the players come back then we're doing an okay job.
Definitely.
But I'll let Scott answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, well, ultimately, for us as co-head coaches, we have built-in measures. So we have the coaching subcommittee.
Money, we need that money to come back to us. That's loads of people know. I'm lying.
So ultimately, we have the Wigmore's coaching subcommittee, which we report to, and they expect certain facts and figures which we present to them, so they know how the coaching program is doing. So they know about retention, how certain age groups are doing, how genders are doing in the classes. Do we have disparity? Do we have more boys and girls in particular age groups, and can we bridge the gap? And also on an annual basis, we present to the AGM with our goals and have we achieved our our previous year's goals. So that's how it's kind of measured essentially. Like for in preparation for the AGM, that obviously makes me and Joe sit down and come up with goals for the coaching program. And they've examples of that has been like more yellow ball junior participation, getting them to come down more, and that's why we created stuff like the junior box leagues and getting them to play a lot more together, try and get them to do junior social, etc. Getting the good juniors to do adult social, to try and drive that success. And we just measure that through simple participation levels for those particular goals. Other measures of success, how happy are people with the coaching program as well? Speaking to parents, speaking to players, seeing if they're getting feedback, etc. That's how we generally try and measure it. Okay. I don't know if Joe's got anything else to to add on our program measures.
At the beginning, I think if players come back, that's a pretty good idea of whether we're doing our job well. Or you, Jake, if you're doing your job well, then players will come back, and we'll see that first.
Exactly. Also, you could add player reports to the level of success, because then you can chart. It depends what you define as success, because you can see how players are progressing as well. Because how we're rating their, how well they're doing in particular stages. So we can track that now with our player report cards as well.
I'll tell you what, one thing that we haven't said at all there, one thing that we probably haven't really mentioned at all, other than maybe early on, is about the coaches that work for us. We are the head coach. Part of our job is to make sure that the coaches that work for us are doing their job, but they're also happy, because again, I think if someone's happy, they're going to do their job a bit better. So making sure that our coaches are happy is a key priority of ours. To come up with some ways of measuring that, Scott. How often Jake smiles on court.
Exactly.
Every second can go into RBF sometimes.
And also measuring about, because we do that with team meetings and seeing what players, if coaches want to do certain different classes, and making sure that they all have the experience they want, doing different types of sessions and not being too narrow or too, etc. So, so the way we can measure that, we can add to that is, regular team meetings and group discussions on the coaching program.
No, there's a great broad range from so many points of views there, from looking at success from the coach, your coaches, the players, the parents, from the committee, and obviously your own goals as well. So it's great to have covered a lot of insights, and a lot of this Q&A interview has obviously been based around like a head coach point of view, which, coaches, players, parents wouldn't always hear regularly or that often. So I was actually really excited to do this one, because there's stuff which I've never heard before, and certainly your members, your players, etc., have never heard. So it's good to have them to understand, you know, what you guys do in your role, etc. Thank you for that. So that's a wrap. Good stuff.
Woo!
Well, thank you for joining me this week on my coach interview guide. I obviously couldn't have done it without either of you. And thank you to you all at home for watching. Be sure to tune in for my next episode, and I wish you all the best.